This story is not fiction. Remember that. Carl raised his rifle and the bull elk was just about 150 yards out, standing broadside. The air was cold and still, perfect conditions for the shot. He took a breath, he held it, and then he pulled the trigger. And once he pulled that trigger, the bullet stopped. What's going on, Midnight Mafia? Thank you guys so much for joining me again. Once again, if you find yourself keep coming back and back to this channel, but you haven't subscribed, please subscribe for the kids. Do it for the kids, and also hit that like button because that's what tells me that I should keep doing this, basically. And thank you guys so much for getting that last video to be our best video ever in the whole 3+ years of Mystery Files. Thank you all. I love you. This story, you asked for paranormal, you asked for supernatural, you asked for crazy. I got that. And you also asked for military mystery, stuff like that, so you might want to keep your eye out for next week. But without any further ado, as of now, it's time to slip into a mind that's not our own. Let's go.
It would be absolutely awesome if you subscribe to this channel and hit that like button. Love y'all.
On the afternoon of October 25th, 1974, that man was Carl Higdon, a 41-year-old oil rig foreman who had taken the day off from work to go elk hunting in the Medicine Bow National Forest, which is about 40 miles south of Rawlins, Wyoming. Now let me tell you about Carl. Carl was the type of man that people trusted. He had served in the Air Force during the Korean War. He had worked the oil rigs for 15 years, brutal, dangerous work that required focus and a lot of nerve. He was married, he had 4 kids, and he even coached Little League. He went to church every Sunday. This was Carl. Carl Higdon was for sure not the type to make anything up. So that morning, he borrowed the company truck and drove south toward McCarty Canyon. And the road got rough after a few miles, so Carl parked and continued on foot with his brand new 7mm Magnum rifle. As you could imagine, the October air was sharp and cold. The trees were mostly bare at this point, and patches of old snow were covering the ground. And at around 4 p.m., Carl topped a ridge and spotted 5 elk that were grazing right below. The bull in the group was massive, probably 800 pounds. So Carl then moved into position. He raised his rifle slowly, and the elk still hadn't spotted him. Everything was perfect from a hunter's point of view. So he centered the crosshairs on the rifle, took a breath, and then he squeezed the trigger. But the rifle didn't kick. The 7mm Magnum has a recoil like a mule, okay? It should have slammed into his shoulder hard, but there was nothing, just silence. And then that's when Carl spotted the impossible. The bullet was moving forward through the air, slowly, like someone had slowed down time. Carl could track it with his eyes as if it was just gliding towards maybe 50 feet ahead. And then it just dropped straight down into the snow. Carl, baffled at this point, just stood there with his rifle still raised, trying to process what the heck he just saw. And that's when he noticed the forest had gone completely silent. No wind, no birds, no sounds at all. So Carl lowered his rifle. His heart was pounding out of control at this point. And that's when he heard the voice behind him. And it said, "How you doing?" And yes, I swear that's what it said, "How you doing?" I'm not acting like Joey from Friends for no reason. And that's when Carl spun around, and standing about 15 feet away was something roughly human-shaped. About 6 feet tall, but that's where the similarities ended. Carl's mouth instantly went dry. His rifle was still in his hands, but his arms felt like lead. He managed to stammer, pretty good? And the thing tilted its head and asked, "Are you hungry?" And that's when, before Carl could even answer, a small, clear package floated through the air toward him. Just floated. The package contained 4 pills. And if this was just some grand hallucination, then somebody needs to explain why 7 hours later, doctors would stare at this man's x-rays like they were looking at the wrong man. And Carl, he couldn't explain why, but he took one of the pills and he swallowed it. And then the thing spoke again to him. He said, "My name is Auso-1." Carl's eyes kind of drifted past it to the clearing behind. And that's when he saw a large, transparent cube sitting in the snow. Maybe 10 feet on each side, completely clear, except for how it reflected from the sunlight. Auso-1 followed his gaze, and he said, "Do you want to come along?" So Carl tried to answer. He tried to say no, but his mouth wouldn't work. And then, time skipped. Seriously, guys, try to imagine this. Carl blinked. And I actually got another case about somebody blinking. We'll talk about that later. But Carl blinked, and the forest warped, like warp speed around him. He didn't remember walking, didn't remember climbing in. He just found himself inside of this clear cube. The crazy thing is, the 5 elk were in there too. All of them, standing perfectly still, frozen, like statues. Their eyes open, but they were not blinking. Carl tried to move and realized that he was strapped to some kind of chair now. His wrists and ankles were restrained. Something was on his head, and it felt like a wire helmet. So he looked out through the transparent walls, and they were moving fast. The trees below were shrinking. The mountains were getting smaller and smaller. And then the ground completely fell away. They were above the clouds. They were above everything. Carl could actually see the curve of the earth. And now here's where the story gets harder to follow. Not because Carl changed it, no. He never did. Not once in 47 years. But because this part never came back clearly, even under hypnosis. So I'm sure you want to know what Carl remembered. Okay, well, what Carl remembered was this. The trip felt impossibly fast. Seconds, maybe a minute. But Auso-1 told him that they were traveling to his home planet, a distance so far the number didn't even feel real. And when they arrived, Carl saw a massive tower rising from the ground like the Space Needle, but covered in bright flashing lights, hundreds of them. The lights actually hurt to look at them. And this tower made a deep buzzing sound. Carl could feel it in his chest. Auso-1 guided him inside, up the elevator into this large room, and Carl was told to stand on a platform, you could say.
What are you doing to me?
Cataloging.
Let me go.
A glass panel shaped like a shield emerged from this wall and began moving up and down his body, scanning him. Up and down for several minutes. And then Auso-1 spoke again. "You don't suit our purpose." That was it. No explanation. Auso-1 reached toward Carl's pocket and the remaining pills floated back to him. And then he handed Carl his rifle. From there, everything went black. And Carl woke up, face down in the dirt, his head pounding, every muscle in his body aching. He tried to stand, but his legs felt like jelly and just wouldn't work. So he looked around, squinting in the darkness. You see, he was in the forest, but not where he had been. The terrain was different. It was rockier. His truck was nearby, but it wasn't where he had left it. It was stuck axle deep in mud. And here's the thing, right? Carl's truck was 2-wheel drive. It shouldn't have been able to reach this location. The terrain was way too rough. So Carl, completely out of it at this point, he stumbles to the truck and he grabs his CB radio. And literally, as his hands are shaking, he says, "This is Carl Higdon. I need help. I don't know where I am." And what he didn't notice at that point was that it was already 11:30 p.m. So even though he thought it was seconds or a flash or maybe a minute, 7.5 hours had passed by. A search party ended up finding Carl just before midnight. He was sitting in his truck, dazed and barely coherent. And when they asked what happened, well, he couldn't remember, so he couldn't answer. They took him to the hospital, and the doctors ran all of these tests, blood work, x-rays, neurological exams, you name it. And that's when things got even more strange. Carl had suffered from tuberculosis years earlier. The disease left permanent scars on his lungs, clearly visible on the x-rays. Carl had seen those scars on his own films multiple times. Every doctor noted them in his records. But guess what? When they x-rayed Carl's lungs that night, for some reason, incredibly, the scars were gone. Completely gone. So the attending physician stared at these films, and then he pulled Carl's old records and compared them, and he had no explanation. Because lung scars don't disappear, they are permanent. But Carl's were gone. And that's legitimate scientific proof that we have about this. And over the next few days, Carl's memories started to come back piece by piece, slowly, in fragments. He remembered the bullet stopping, the silence, the voice, Auso 1, the cube, the tower, the scan. You don't suit our purpose. So Carl actually told his wife, and then he told the sheriff. He told anyone who would listen. And when his story hit the newspapers, people didn't really know what to make of it. But Carl, as I said, never changed his story. Not once in 47 years. And at this point, most people would assume Carl Higdon finally broken under the pressure. That what he experienced was a hallucination or a stress-induced episode. And honestly, that would make sense. Well, that is, except for what the investigators found next. Okay, the police now asked him to take a polygraph test. And Carl actually agreed immediately. And believe it or not, he passed. There was absolutely no deception detected. So then they brought in Dr. Leo Sprinkle, a psychologist from the University of Wyoming. And Dr. Sprinkle's job was to figure out if Carl had suffered some kind of a mental break, if he was lying or if he was delusional. So Dr. Sprinkle put Carl under hypnosis, multiple different sessions, and every time Carl told the exact same story. Same details, same sequence, same emotional responses as well. Plus, there were no contradictions and no inconsistencies. Dr. Sprinkle himself later wrote, quote, "I find no evidence of a hoax, no evidence of psychotic reaction. I'm left with the uncomfortable feeling that the case is happening as the individual describes." So basically, guys, what he's saying, this doctor is saying, yes, this actually happened. This man is not lying. Think about the implications of what that means. ET is real. These cubes that are translucent or clear, real. Being able to be taken to another planet to see if you suit a purpose, real. And then 3 other witnesses, including Carl's wife, reported seeing strange red and green lights in the area that night. Lights that moved in ways that didn't match any aircraft. Lights that hovered, lights that accelerated at impossibly fast speeds. So as you can see, this is a story, but there's also facts that go along with it. Don't you love that? Because when investigators went back to the site, they documented everything. Carl's truck was found 3 miles from where he'd parked it, in terrain where a 2-wheel vehicle could not drive or navigate to. There were no tracks leading to the location. It's as if the car was just dropped there. Not to mention, in case you thought that bullet thing was fake, well, the bullet was recovered. but the lead portion was gone. Only the brass casing remained, deformed, misshapen. And the elk? Well, the elk were gone. No tracks, no blood, no remains. 5 animals, each weighing 800 pounds, had vanished. Carl actually never went hunting again, not once. Not in the remaining 48 years of his life. He said the experience changed him. It made him way more spiritual. He stopped eating meat. He spent more time with his family. But he never stopped talking about what happened. And he never stopped answering questions to people that were curious. And I love that about him. Plus, I know you were wondering, guess what? He never tried to profit from it at all. Never. He never sold the rights. He never wrote a book. He never went on talk shows. He just lived with it. In 2017, his wife, Marjorie, though, did publish a book about the encounter. Carl was 84. He read it. He approved it. He confirmed that, yes, that's exactly what happened. And Carl Higdon died on January 26th, 2022. He was 88 years old. And in all those years, through polygraphs, hypnosis, hospital exams, media interviews, skeptical investigators, his story never changed. Not one detail, not one time. Dr. Sprinkle asked Carl once what he thought Ausa 1 meant when he said humans don't suit their purpose. Carl thought for a long time before answering that question. And then he said that he believed that they were looking for people to take, to study, maybe to even breed. But Carl had a vasectomy years earlier, and maybe that's why they actually rejected him. But then Carl said something else, something that Dr. Sprinkle wrote down. Carl said Ausa 1 told him Earth was used as a game preserve, that they came here to hunt, almost like that movie Predators. They came here to collect animals, that they'd been doing it for a long time, and that humans were actually considered too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous to keep for themselves. So Dr. Sprinkle asked what he meant by that. And Carl said, quote, "They were scanning me to see if I was worth taking, but they saw something that made them reject me." And then he was quiet for a moment. "They said humans were too dangerous to keep, but I don't think they meant all humans." He paused again. "I think they meant me. What I'd done, what I'd seen, the violence during the war, the accidents where men died and I kept working, how I could pull a trigger and not think twice about it. I think they rejected me because of what they found inside of me." And if Carl Higdon was telling the truth, then whatever stopped that bullet in midair wasn't hunting elk. It was deciding whether humans belonged on that same list. No one has ever proven Carl Higdon was lying, and no one has ever explained what happened on October 25th, 1974. A man walked into the Wyoming wilderness with a rifle. He fired a bullet that stopped in midair. He lost 7 hours, and when he came back, the scars on his lungs were gone. His truck had moved 3 miles. 5 elk had vanished, and his bullet had been turned inside out. And Carl Higdon never went hunting again. Now, I know some of you were skeptics, but be honest. Do you think he's telling the truth? And also, guys, I just want to tell you how much I love that you watch all these videos, and it means a lot that you watch them all the way through, because I promise I'm always going to try to bring you exciting endings or gut punch endings. And that's why this video right here, it's the biggest video I've ever had. So if you watch this as well, it'll help the retention, it'll help the click-through rate, all those YouTubey things, right? But it'll help the channel, and I appreciate y'all for that. But if you don't want to watch this one, watch this one instead. I love you guys, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.